Welcome to all of you to this virtual class of biology. The topic of our discussion today is organisms and population. Now, we are dealing with a branch of biology which is called ecology. So, ecology is a biological branch which deals with interactions among organisms and also among the living organisms and its physical environment, that is the non-living components. And study of ecology is very important in order to develop a sustainable environment, maintaining the natural environment and biotic communities, and proper use and conservation of natural resources, and therefore it resolves the issues of local, regional, and global environmental problems. Now, while studying ecology, we come across two factors. One is abiotic factors, which deals with all non-living components. That means the environmental factors, and the biotic factors are the living organisms. Now, it is basically ecology is actually concerned with four levels of biological organization. We understand that the individuals which are the individuals which they are the organisms, and group of organisms, they form a larger aggregation which is called population. So individual organisms, when they aggregate together in a defined area, we call it population. Then several population of different organisms, that forms communities, and various communities together, they form the largest unit of the ecosystem. It is the biomes. So ecological hierarchy means it is, we can think of organisms, population, communities, and biomes. These are all ecological levels of grouping of organisms. Now, when we are talking about the abiotic factors, it is mainly dealing with air, water, light, temperature, humidity, soil condition like pH of the soil, salinity of the soil, nutrient qualities, nutrient amount, etc., which are utilized by the plants and all other organisms, living organisms, through the food chain. And the biotic factors mainly includes living organisms like the green plants, which are basically called the producers. Then producers pass on their food to different levels of consumers. And then third group are the pathogens, which act as decomposers on the dead bodies of both producers and consumers, and recycle the organic, break down the organic substances into simpler forms for recycling. So biotic factors include competition among different organisms, different levels of organisms, which can be predation, commensalism, etc. Various interactions are there: competition, predation, commensalism, symbiosis, and obviously the pathogen. Now, what is environment? Environment is actually the sum total of all biotic and abiotic factors, the substances and conditions which surround an organism and potentially influence the organisms without becoming their constituent part. So that is called environment. At organism level, the physiological ecology, it mainly tries to understand how different the organisms are adapted to their environment in terms of their survival and reproduction. The variation in the intensity and duration of temperature, along with the annual variations in rainfall, results in formation of major biomes. Major biomes in the universe, in the Earth's surface, are like the desert, the rainforest, and tundra region. And we know that regional and local variations within each biome, they actually lead to the formation of different kinds of habitats like tropical rainforest, deciduous forest, sea coast, desert land. And the habitat that includes biotic components are pathogens, predators, parasites, competitors of the organisms, along with the interaction is going on continuously. So the key elements that lead to variation in physical and chemical conditions of different habitats are basically temperature, water, light, and soil. And each organism in the environment, it has a defined range of conditions that it can tolerate, the diversity which it utilizes, and a distinct functional role in the ecological system. Altogether, it comprises the niche of the organism. So niche is, this is the total environment, maybe this is a total environment where a particular area is occupied by the birds, for example. Again, in the tree tops, maybe, but tree in on the tree branches, and on the same beneath the same tree in this soil part where the rodents, they have their niche here. So in the same environment, the defined range of condition is varying, and so they have a defined range of area where they thrive best, and functionally what they are doing, that is also important. So all their functions and physiology, that depends upon their niche. So this is one niche. Bird have this niche on the tree top, and the rodents, they have the niche in the under the soil, because they are the burrowing animal. It is in the same tree top, under the same tree top. So as we have discussed, temperature is the most important ecological factor which determine the biomass of a place. Average temperature on the land, it varies seasonally and decreases progressively from the equator towards the pole. So when we move from this equator, this is the equator, and we reaching towards the pole, north pole and south pole, the temperature definitely decreases, that we know. So it is the tropical temperature, and gradually it is minus there. Temperature affects the enzyme kinetics and basal metabolism of organisms, having separate different physiological functions according to the area. That is why the polar animals can withstand the cold desert, cold ice, and the equator region is very high. The organisms that can tolerate wide range of temperature, they are called eurythermal. For example, cat, dog, tigers, etc. And the organisms which have the ability to tolerate only a narrow range of temperature, they are called stenothermal. For example, fish, crocodile, penguin, polar bear, like that. Then comes water. Now, water is the most important factor where life has originated. So, productivity and distribution of plants, it is heavily dependent on water. Water is the main raw material for photosynthesis, as we all know. Now, for aquatic organisms, the quality of the water, that is the chemical composition, pH, these are very important. The salt concentration of the water, that is the salinity, is also important in deciding the way they decide how the animals will adapt. So the animals which fish which are mainly of the sea fish living in saline water, they cannot thrive in fresh water. Similarly, freshwater fishes, when they are in the saline water, they will not live properly, they will die. So the organisms which can tolerate wide range of salinities, they are called euryhaline. They are salmon, herring, etc. And organisms which have the ability to tolerate only a narrow range of salinities, they are called stenohaline, like goldfish, haddock, etc. Now, light. Plants produce food through photosynthesis. Light is the main source. And so light is universally required by all green plants. But some plants are adapted to low light condition because they are overshadowed by tall canopied trees. Flowering in some plants occur only in presence of critical daylight, which is known as photoperiodism. Some flowers bloom in presence of light, and some flowers bloom in the dark, and when there is light they just close down. So availability of light and land is closely linked with the temperature, as sun is source of both light and temperature. And another component of the sunlight, which is the ultraviolet rays, it is quite harmful for all plants and animals. Now we come to soil. Soil is the place which gives shelter to many animals, and it is the main source of nutrients, water to the plants. So types of soil depends upon climate, weathering conditions, and soil may be of two types. One is the transported soil, that means after the weathering, the soil is transported to a different place. different place through various transporting agent, that is by wind or water. So soil particle, the broken particles, they are transported and they form a soil at a different place, that is called transported soil. And the soil particles which are present in the place where they have, same place where they have originated, same place, that is called the sedimentary soils. Now, soil composition, their grain size, that determines the water holding capacity and also the percolation rate, along with their pH, mineral composition, and topography, etc. These are important factors which determine the vegetation of a particular area. So, in course of evolution, it is found that many species have evolved constant internal environment to permit all biochemical reactions and physiological function to work with maximum efficiency, and it has overall fitness of the species. So we get organisms response to the environmental stresses. We can classify them as three. The one is the regulator, conformer, and partial regulator. Regulators, they remain static. They remain balanced at all conditions. The internal level, it does not vary along with the external environmental conditions. For the conformers, it varies, like the cold-blooded animal, warm-blooded animal, like that. And the temperature varies with the season. And there are partial regulators. To some extent, they can regulate, but to some extent, they are varying. So the internal balance of the body in relation to the outer environment is termed as homeostasis. So the regulators are all warm-blooded animals, means where the temperature of the body is constant. They can maintain their homeostasis constantly by physiological means, ensuring constant body temperature, constant osmotic concentration. Their thermoregulation and osmoregulation are the major process which help them to maintain the constancy. So in summer, at a very high temperature, our body temperature will not rise because we go on sweating constantly, releasing our latent heat of the body through evaporation, which cause cooling of the body. Again, in winter, when we start to shiver, it is a kind of mechanical energy which generates kinetic energy, and that finally produces heat that raises the body temperature. So we have our own mechanism, birds and mammals. Birds, and actually we should call it mammals, because fish, amphibians, and reptiles, they cannot maintain such homeostasis. Their body temperature varies. During winter, they go for hibernation, and in summer, they also cannot withstand the high temperature, so they go for aestivation. They spend some inactive life where in order to keep down their body temperature. So conform are those animals and plants where body temperature changes with ambient temperature. As for example, we call it fish, toad, frog, snakes, crocodile, etc. Heat loss or heat gain actually depends upon the surface area. Now, small animals have a larger surface area relative to their volume, so they tend to lose body heat very fast when it is cold outside. Uh, then they have to they have to spend much energy to generate body heat through metabolic functions. And that is the main reason why very small animals are rarely found in polar regions. They cannot adapt to the polar region. Another factor is how do the organisms survive with the different conditions. So there is a way to migrate. Organisms migrate from the stressful, unfavorable habitat to a more suitable habitat. But this is found even in birds. To avoid very cold area, they migrate to more tropical climates. Mostly during the Siberian birds migrate to the Indian Asian climates. Another function is to suspend. This is found mostly in bacteria, fungi, and lower plants with the thick wall spores. Spores are formed mainly for asexual reproduction, but spores are formed in bacteria, fungi, which help them to survive the unfavorable conditions. Spores have a very thick wall. So spores have thick wall, and inside the spores, so they can contain numerous nuclei together, but they will be capsulated by the thick wall. This is an encapsulated wall, and these spores, when this wall germinates, wall destroys, breaks up, then the spores germinate, and the spores germinate into when there is a suitable condition. In higher plants, seeds and some other vegetative reproducing structures also serve the means to overcome the periods of stress. We know that seeds germinate only when there is favorable conditions. They will germinate and the seeds will disperse. And during the dormant condition, the metabolic activities are reduced to very low amount. So these are the mechanism by which organisms, animals overcome the conformers they try to overcome. That is hibernation, that is we called winter sleep. They pass a inactive period during winter in order to reduce their metabolic function. This is estivation is called the summer sleep, and diapause is a stage of suspension development in mostly in zooplankton. Zooplankton means the unicellular protozoans in aquatic life, in lakes and ponds. So adaptation is the process by which organisms undergo morphological, physiological, and behavioral changes that enable the organisms to survive and reproduce in its changed habitat, in its habitat where it is now thriving. So we find that kangaroo rat in North America deserts, they are present, they are living in an area without water, much water. So they have to fulfill the water requirements by internal oxidation of the fat in absence of water. It also has the ability to concentrate its urine. So minimal amount of water is used to remove the excretory products. The same thing is also found in case of camel. They can travel a long distance without drinking water. Another adaptation is thick cuticle in many plants. They prevent loss of water. This is very common in case of cactus, desert plants. The camp plants, they have a different mechanism in which since they try to conserve water, the stomata are always closed during daytime. So the stomata are open during night, and they have a different mechanism to utilize carbon dioxide for photosynthesis, at the same time reducing the loss of water. Mammals from colder climates, they have shorter ears and limbs, so that minimizes the heat loss. This is called Allen's rule. In polar seas, aquatic mammals, they have a thick layer of fat. Whales also, they have thick layer of fat called blubber below their skin, which acts as insulators and reduce loss of body heat. Altitude sickness is observed at higher altitude that includes symptoms like fatigue, nausea, heart palpitation. This is mainly due to less oxygen and atmospheric pressure. The person who is residing in a plain region, they feel these problems more, and it takes some time to gradually get to acclimatize to that climate change, and then that stop experiencing the altitude sickness. So this is a kind of physiological adaptation. Similar, a number of marine invertebrates and fish, they live in temperature always less than zero, and some lives in great depth in ocean where the pressure is very high because of, and they can do so because of their certain biochemical adaptations. Some organisms like desert lizard, they lack physiological ability that mammals have, but deal with high temperature of their habitat by behavioral means. They bask in the sun and absorb heat, and when their body temperature drops below the comfort zone, but they moves in shade and when the ambient temperature starts increasing. Now we are going to discuss the next hierarchy of organisms, that is population. So what is population? Population is the group of individuals of any species living in a well-defined geographical area at a point of time, which share or compete for similar resources. They can potentially interbreed and constitute a population. So, to understand population, there are several attributes which we must learn. One is birth rate and death rate. Birth rate is called natality, and death rate is called mortality. Birth rate is called natality, and death rate we all know it is called mortality. The birth and death rates are referred as per capita birth or death, which increase or decreases with respect to members of the population. Per thousand, it is calculated number of birth or death per thousand in a year or in a unit time. Another important attribute is sex ratio. An individual may be male or female, uh, but there must be a defined sex ratio in the population, which is a stable one. Male female ratio, if it is very different from 50-50, like if it is 30-70, then the population will not be continued to be stable one. So a population, when we study a population at given time, it consists of different individuals of different age groups. So we can classify the population into broadly into three age groups. One is the pre-reproductive, that means before adolescence. Another is the reproductive state, matured. And next one is the old age, that is post-reproductive. It can be further subdivided into like 0 to 10 years age group, like that also. And we can define a population by seeing the pyramid they produce. So the pyramids of shape of the pyramids are maybe an expanding. The first one is expanding. We can see gradually this is the pre-reproductive numbers are more. Gradually it is declining when it is going move out. So this is an expanding population. Gradually it is expanding. The second one is more or less the age groups are all the groups are stable. So this is a stable population, and this one is declining. We can see that there are more death in the pre-reproductive and post-reproductive period. So it is a declining population. So population size or population density, that is n, is measured in terms of number, but it may sometimes may not be appropriate. And we always compare two population with the help of population density. So the population growth, the size of the population is always changing. Every minute there are so many births, every minute there are so many deaths. So the natality is the number of birth during a given period in the population. Mortality is the number of deaths during a given period in the population. And two other factors are immigration and emigration. Immigration means we know individuals of the same species which have come into the habitat, and emigration is the individual of the population who have left the habitat. So all these factors together control a population. Now, if n is the population density at time t, then the density at time t1 will be this equation. And population density will increase if the number of birth plus number of immigrants is more than the number of death plus number of immigrants. Otherwise, it will increase. So birth and immigrants are positive factors for population growth. These two are positive factors, this and this. They contribute to the growth of population, and mortality and immigration, they contribute for decline of the population. So growth of population, it depends upon the availability of the food, habit condition, and other biotic and abiotic factors. And the growth can be described under two models. One is the exponential growth curve, another is the sigmoid growth curve. In the exponential growth curve, we define it by this equation where dn by dt is equal to rn. It grows continuously with time if food, habit condition, etc. are all favorable. And if they are unfavorable, suddenly there will be a sudden fall. There will be a sudden fall. Whereas, so exponential growth occurs when they are available in sufficient amount. And this R is called the intrinsic rate of natural increase, and this B and D are the birth rate and death rate respectively. Another is logistic growth. There is a competition between the individuals of a population for food and space. The fittest organism survives and reproduces. And this type of growth initially shows a lag phase initially. This is a lag phase. In this S curve, we can say this First phase is lag phase, then it grows, suddenly it is a log phase, and then it stabilizes, then it called an S phase. Since resources of growth for growth of populations are finite and become limiting, the logistic growth model is considered to be a more realistic one. So we have to learn these two equations which are related to two types of growth curves, interpretation of the equations. Now we are coming to population interaction. So there are different types of organisms inhabiting the same environment, and they have different type of interactions. Now, very common one is predation. We know one is prey and another is predator. For example, deer and tiger. This can be represented as where one species is positively helped, another one is negatively helped. So it is called predation. Another is competition, where two organisms are fighting each other for food, space, etc. These two are negative, so these are competition. Third is parasitism. Parasite is the enjoying the benefit of living in the host body, and so it is negatively affecting the host. So it is a plus minus interaction, parasitism. Commensalism is a type of organism. It is a symbiotic relationship, but where one organism is benefited, but the other one is not affected anyway. So it is plus zero. Mutualism is another such a symbiotic relation where both are positively helped. For example, the symbiotic bacteria in the root nodules of the pea plants. So they are, each one is helping other. And another one is amensalism. Amensalism is where one organism is negatively affected and the other one is just neutral. There is nothing. It's not affected at all. So these are the various examples of predations. Normally, predators are responsible for transferring the energy from the plants to subsequent higher trophic levels in the food chain. They also can control the prey population. Predators can be utilized for biological control of agricultural pests. They maintain the species diversity, and but we must remember that overexploitation of prey by the predators results in extinction of the prey and predator. And the prey which try to save themselves from the predation, there are various ways of adaptation. One is the camouflaging by coloration, and where they just camouflage themselves with the surrounding environments, which are very commonly found among insects, frogs, reptiles. And sometimes they are attacking mode, so they are producing some poisonous substances to affect the predators, such as monarch butterfly. For the plants, we understand there are various thorns like in the cactus and acacia, which are mainly for their protection against predation animals. They sometimes produce and store chemicals which are unhealthy for the predators. And plants products like nicotine, caffeine, quinine, strychnine, opium, these are also basically against the grazers and browsers. So these plants, they themselves can save them from getting eaten up by the grazing animals. Competition can be between two unrelated species, most, and it may be between the two similar, like in fish. We know that we can cultivate these two fishes in the same pond because they do not have competition. They have their food from different strata of the water, so we can cultivate them in the same pond, same culture. But if they consume same food, it is difficult. They both of their growth will be hampered. Normally competition is won by the superior species. There is a rule, Gauss's competition exclusion principle, which we must learn by heart. Two closely related species which competing for same resources cannot coexist, as the competitively inferior one will be eliminated. Parasitism, it's an interaction we know between a parasite who finds shelter and food in a host body where host is harmfully affected. So parasites undergo a lot of adaptation for They develop hooks and suckers, for example, in tapeworms. They do not have the various organs. For example, tapeworms is a height of adaptation. There is no respiratory, no circulatory system, digestive system, because parasites take up the completely digested food from the host. So there is no need, but they have a very high reproductive capacity. They have a very well developed reproductive system. Now, parasites normally reduce the survival of the host. Growth and reproductive rates are reduced, so they affect the hosts in any way. So that is a plus minus relationship. The parasites can be classified into two types: ectoparasite, which depend on the external surface of the host, for example, the ticks on the dogs, and endoparasites, which are present inside the body, for example, liver fluke, plasmodium, bacteria causing cholera, etc. Mutualism is plus plus. Both organisms are benefited. It's one example of symbiosis actually. So very good mutualism is found in lichen. It is a mutualism between fungi and algae. Another is mycorrhiza, which is a mutual relation between the fungi and the root of higher plants. Another mutualism is pollination of plants by insects, where insects get their food and plants are helped for transferring the pollens. There are Mediterranean orchids, which are the sexual deceit for pollination. They appears as female bee. Now, amensalism is an interaction between two different species in which one species are harmed and the other is neither harmed nor benefited. So this example can be, we can find is the antibiotics, when they are applied to an organism for killing the bacteria are destroyed or fungi are destroyed, but the antibiotic producing fungi, it has no benefit or no harm as well. So this goes zero and this is negative. So thank you.